of the music. Did it take any of y'all back? Was it too loud for some of you? Good. Because this is the era of the music from the stories that we gathered. A few months back, Leon Overbay and I had this idea. I was teaching a class called Chronicling Our Veterans' Voices at the McKinney Center, and he was helping me find some lively candidates to do this. Some of them are sitting here. How many of you were some of our candidates? Just raise your hands. Back in the back, Lloyd, Gary, great. And then Leon and I thought, wouldn't it be great if we did something more with these stories? I think we had only gotten one of you at this point, and that's when we started concocting the idea that we would get a lot of the veterans and then use their stories for our Memorial Day show. And so Leon is still with us, and he was with me the whole time I was writing this script, and he's been with us the whole time, so he is still here. And Pam is in the audience, and we just want to let you know that Leon is pretty much responsible for this show tonight, because he found the folks to gather these stories from. If you all don't know, if you're new here, A Night with the Yarn Exchange is an original storytelling radio hour that is based on the stories of the people from this region, and they are all true. They all started out true, but they come from you. So tonight, in honor of Memorial Day, those we lost and those who served with those we lost, as well as the families, we went out and gathered stories from veterans. We talked to nurses. We talked with family members, children, and spouses of military personnel, and got these stories and put them together in what I think is a really incredible piece. One that we haven't had an opportunity to do in the 5 years that we've been doing the Yarn Exchange show, which is Veteran Stories. And I just want to thank everybody for their stories and thank all the veterans for their service. My pop was a veteran, my grandparents, well, you all know this. My dad did 3 tours in Vietnam. I was born during the Tet Offensive. So this is also dear to my heart as well. Just a few housekeeping rules. We're taking you back to the days of radio where, I don't even have my cell phone on me. That's how good I am. So those of you who are not as good as I am, turn off your cell phones now or set them on stun, and any other device that might make noise, like an iPad or a little tablet, electric popcorn popper, battery-operated leaf blower. If it makes noise, just turn it off. So the cast was in here yesterday working really hard and rehearsing, and I know a lot of our young people went home and rehearsed even more last night and this morning. So now it's your turn to rehearse. So Vietnam stories, we're going to have a few that they might bring a tear to your eyes. So let's practice. I wanted to rehearse them, you guys. And there are a few, believe it or not, that are going to make you laugh. So let's practice that laughter. Great. And hopefully, because they live for it, some of the stories are going to make you want to do this. All right, Lauren, let's take it away.
Coming to you from Jonesborough, Tennessee, the storytelling capital of the world, and broadcasting from the International Storytelling Center, it's A Night with the Yarn Exchange.
At the Jonesborough Yarn Exchange, give us a story and we'll give it a name. We'll knit them all together in a brand new play, then retell it the Jonesborough way. Let's get this started now. Toss me a ball of yarn, I'll show you how.
everyone. This is Jonesborough's original storytelling radio hour, A Night with the Yarn Exchange, and I'm your host, Lori Homestead. With me tonight are the Yarn Exchange players, along with Tom Sizemore, who will be co-hosting with me this evening.
Thanks, Lori. Well, you know, I've adopted a healthy lifestyle, and so I dined on the grilled tofu and asparagus at this afternoon's Memorial Day picnic. And then I went for a walk in the Memorial Garden on Boone Street.
You know, I did that last year, Tom, to remember and to call out the names on the markers. Now, some places have museums and pictures, and we have those too, but here in Jonesborough, we also remember through stories, even the hard ones.
The stories in tonight's show come from real people from right here in Jonesborough and all over Appalachia.
Yes, and what you will hear tonight are all true stories.
Well, yes, as Joe likes to say, they all started out true.
Well, before we get started tonight, we want to thank our sponsor, Mountain States Health Alliance, for their support of this program.
And where would we be without frozen toast? Mom's new mornings come too early for you. Then frozen toast is the answer. From the freezer to the toaster, what could be simpler than frozen toast? Hit it, kids.
It's the breakfast sensation from coast to coast. What do you want for breakfast, kids? Frozen toast.
Tonight we're also excited that joining us is this week's Tellern residence, Dolores Hydock. This is going to be a real treat.
It sure is, Tom. Well, folks, tonight we're telling stories from our veterans. First, I would like to ask, though, do we have any veterans or family members of veterans in our audience? Please raise your hand. Wow. Let's give them all a big hand. Thank you so very much for your service.
It's important, Lori, to acknowledge and appreciate the sacrifices made by all of those who served.
God bless you all and thank you.
There was a time in our country when we forgot to do that. A time not that long ago.
40-some years ago, but it doesn't feel that long. Like last week.
And sometimes, 40-some years ago, feels like last night.
We sat down with our Vietnam veterans and collected their stories to share with you tonight.
Many of these men are just beginning to tell their stories. They served their country, many of them the children of World War II veterans. But unlike the heroes' welcome and ticker tape parades their fathers came home to, our Vietnam veterans were often met with angry crowds, name-calling, and even worse. They came home to a world so different from the one they had experienced, and without the support of a grateful nation, many found it hard to go back to their ordinary lives after the horrors they had been through.
My husband was a career military man, someone who's supposed to be trained and hardened against such things. But there are times I look at him and I can see that he isn't here. He's back in the Mekong Delta.
My son was drafted right after high school. Why, he'd never been 50 miles away from the farm. Now he was going to a place he hadn't even learned about in geography. Facing horrors that no one at such an age should ever have to face.
The average age of the Vietnam soldier was 19. That's 1 year younger than I am.
That's only 4 years older than me.
The mothers of these boys prayed for their sons, got high draft numbers, prayed that the war would end, and prayed from 1965 all the way to 1975.
2,709,918 Americans served in uniform between those years.
58,200 never made it home alive. making the ultimate sacrifice for a nation that would take years, decades, to really appreciate that sacrifice.
A big lesson was learned from that era. Don't blame the soldier. When we became involved in Iraq and Afghanistan, some of that uneasiness about involvement returned. But the anger this time was not toward the soldiers sent to serve.
My father was sandwiched between these groups. His father, who fought in World War II in the Pacific Theater, who was expected to fight and thanked for fighting for his country. It was the patriotic thing to do. Then his son, who also chose a career in the military, who served in Iraq, Bosnia, and other hot zones, and who was met by the USO greeters at the Atlanta airport. Greeters who clap and cheer for him as he is dressed in his fatigues and rides the big elevator up the baggage claim. Then there's my dad, who had to change into his civilian clothes on arrival so he could take the bus to the local depot where my mom picked him up, alone, in the dark. He dressed in cities coming home after his second and third tours because when he came home after his first tour wearing his uniform, he and my mother were yelled at and spit on. I remember it. I was 4. I don't remember a lot, except these screaming people began to spit on my parents, and then one man picked me up and held my face in his and told me my daddy was a baby killer, and be careful because he might kill me in my sleep tonight. My dad grabbed me out of that man's arms and shoved him down, and we ran into the station wagon. I recently talked to my mother about that night, and she said, "You were so young, we didn't think. We hoped you wouldn't remember, but you don't forget something like that."
You don't forget something like Vietnam. You try to, but it's always there.
I think our country tried to forget Vietnam, but that didn't work. We had this huge wound. We were trying to heal, but we couldn't even begin the healing process until we stopped ignoring it. In 1982, the Vietnam Memorial Wall opened, nearly a decade after the end of the conflict, a conflict which was never declared a war.
When you go to the wall, it's reflective. When you look at the names, you also see yourself. I found the friends I was looking for and saw my own reflection staring back at me. There was much more there than names on a wall, and for a moment, I was standing with them again.
The first boy who ever kissed me, his name is on that wall. So many people were impacted by the Vietnam conflict, the soldiers who served, the families they left behind. Tonight, we will hear their stories of Vietnam, of home, and for some soldiers, being in 2 places at once.
Swan Lock. I'll never forget Swan Lock. We'd come up on some Red Chinese Special Forces, and for 4 days and 4 nights, we were fighting them. Now, our unit was known to be tough, and we held our own, even though the odds were pretty much against us. But at the end of it, 14 of our guys were killed. 14 bodies drug out of bunkers. It got to the point that I paid no attention to death, and I built a great big wall. I could look at anything, people torn all to pieces, death all around me, and say, quote, "Well, that's tough," unquote, and walk away. After 13 months over there, they say it's time to go home. You did your service. But how do you go home after living day after day, having someone shoot at you and you shooting back? You go from killing people to cutting your lawn. I remember the trip back. People on the plane didn't even speak to me, didn't even look at me. It took years before I could even look at myself. Home, what's home after that? And you get back, you think you've got this wall built up, this great big wall, but it's that same wall you keep hitting when you get home, so big you can't get over it. There was a battle inside of me that was worse than anything I'd ever seen. My wife, she was so good and so patient. We started a family, and with her care and raising the kids, that old dead feeling started to leave, and that warm, sweet feeling started coming back. But it never comes back all the way. In Vietnam, it never stays gone too long. My son, he's 13 now. We were working on my old Ford engine in the garage, and he asked me.
Dad, when were you in Vietnam?
I told him, quote, last night, unquote. Yeah, Vietnam was no easy place.
I was 24 years old, living in Michigan and married to my wife, Sandy. We didn't have any children. We thought we would never have children, so we looked into adoption. We had just started adoption proceedings, and I was drafted. I asked her, "Are you sure you want to move ahead with this adoption? I don't want to leave you to start our family alone."
This baby, our baby, needs a family. I may have to do everything at the beginning, but isn't that what all mothers do anyway?
I know, Sandy, but
we will get this baby, and when you get home, we will be waiting for you.
well, what happened was, in my unit, everyone else was 18, 19 years old. I was 24, an old man. I had a wonderful job and left to do this. Well, they asked me if I wanted to go to OCS. I said no. I wanted to do my 2 years and get out. They put me in a training program and made me an active sergeant at Fort Carson, Colorado. I do the work of a sergeant, but I don't get the pay. I still had the pay of a private. They wanted me in this role because that's the person who chooses the assignments of the men in my unit, including who gets sent to Vietnam. I tried to put my men in places that suited them, where I knew they would have a chance to survive, and, well, the men knew that. That was in 1966. Well, in 1968, toward the end of my 2 years, I had the opportunity to be promoted to sergeant. The only problem was I had to change my military occupation specialty to a combat MOS. Otherwise, I couldn't be promoted. Wanting to start a family, we needed the bigger paycheck. Well, as the assignment officer, I knew I wasn't going to put my name down to go over to Vietnam. So I put in for a promotion, changed my MOS, and started the adoption proceedings.
Gary, we got a call. We need to appear before the judge to review us. A good friend of his daughter is having a baby, and they wanted to place it with us. It's finally happening.
We were approved. We didn't know if it was going to be a boy or a girl, but it would be in about 3 weeks. Okay, about the next week we get orders that the whole division at Fort Carson was going to go down on levee to Vietnam.
What does that mean? I thought you were in charge of assignments.
I'm no longer a troop clerk. I'm a track commander. So what does that mean? I have to go to Vietnam.
What will happen to Gary and Sandy's adoption? Will they be able to start their family? Will the agency refuse them since Gary is being shipped overseas? We'll find out later. Right now, if you're just tuning in, you're listening to Jonesborough's original storytelling radio hour, A Night with the Yarn Exchange, on WETS 89.5 FM out of Johnson City, Tennessee.